Okay, so are we ready to continue?
Sorry, Bande, yes.
Okay. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and we are now ready to resume. And this is the evening session of Saturday, September 5th. And now, before we go further, I just want to sort of recapitulate and take a review of the territory that we have crossed in the course of this day. And I'm going to be doing this by referring to the file that I call the Integrated Stages of the Path by way of full understandings, knowledges, and purifications. And so in the morning, we took after explaining the two vehicles, the vehicle of serenity, the vehicle of bare insight or pure insight, we went through the purification of view, which is Nyanamoli translated as the delimitation of formations. But to avoid the misunderstanding of the word delimitation, maybe we could call this the distinguishing of formations. And the Pali word here is sankhara, which actually in this context is referring to all conditioned phenomena. That is, all phenomena included in the 5 aggregates, 12 sense bases, 18 elements, all of those conditioned phenomena that can be incorporated into nama and rupa, mentality and materiality. So this is the purification called purification of view, and the knowledge that's involved here. So this is the knowledge distinguishing formations, also known as determining the specific nature of mental and material phenomena.
Ante, it's Johnny. Do you mean to share your screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so we see these two purification. Well, I was just explaining the purification of view, Ditti Visuddhi, the distinguishing of formations. In other words, distinguishing the characteristics of conditioned phenomena and then grouping them into the two broad categories of nama and rupa, mental phenomena and material phenomena. And this is also known as Namarupa Vavatana, the determining the nature of mental and material phenomena. So we have here the purification, third purification, and that is equated with this particular knowledge. And then in the afternoon, we took purification number 4, which is purification called purification by overcoming doubt. And this means overcoming doubts concerning the relationship of past, present, and future in regard to the process of rebirth of a sentient being through the 3 periods of time. And through this purification, one comes to understand, through this purification, one applies the principle of dependent origination or conditional arising, one applies this understanding of conditional arising to the mental and material phenomena and comes to understand that this particular assemblage of material and mental phenomena that we call myself existing in the present has come into being through conditions operative in the preceding existence. And that assemblage and those conditions were operating in an assemblage of material and mental phenomena that came into existence through conditions operating in the existence before that. And so one traces this process of conditions and the results of conditions back in time without any perceptible beginning. This is why the Buddha says that the round of samsara, the process of samsara, is without a discoverable beginning, because we have the fruits in the present brought about by conditions in the past, and those conditions were the fruits of conditions operating before them, and those were the fruits of conditions operating before them. And so in this way, the process or the sequence goes back ad infinitum without a first point. And one also traces the sequence of conditions into the future, and one understands as long as these conditions remain operative, as long as ignorance, craving, clinging, and karmic activities remain operative, they will bring about a further existence in the future, a new coming into being of this assemblage of namarupa, of mental and material phenomena. But in the case of the future, the sequence does not necessarily go on to infinity, because it's possible to eliminate ignorance, uproot craving and clinging, stop the creation of karma, of more and more karmic formations. And in that way, one puts an end to the process of repeated existence. So through this purification, one overcomes doubt about the process of conditionality operating in the three periods of time. And the knowledge that's involved here is called the discernment of conditions. Actually, the word parigaha, in a sense, means the grasping, in the sense of the mental grasp or comprehension of conditions. And you'll see that in this particular table, or this particular scheme, I've connected the stages of purification and knowledges with the three types of full understanding. So these two purifications and the knowledges that belong to each come under the heading of full understanding of the known. And we'll be coming to an explanation of that in a little while. Okay, now the next purification is called purification by knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path. And so this is the knowledge that is able to distinguish what is the correct path of practice and what is a development that occurs in the course of practice that is very attractive, even seductive, but is not the correct path. But before one arrives at the fifth purification, there are certain processes or activities of practice that prepare the way for this purification to occur. And so the first of these is called comprehension by groups, and then following upon comprehension by groups comes the knowledge of rise and fall, arising and passing away in the early stage, the first stage. And then the early stage of when one undertakes the contemplation of rise and fall, and the knowledge starts to develop, that is when these 10, what are called the 10 corruptions of insight emerge. And these are the kind of detour, the false detour that leads one or threatens to lead one astray. And so the meditator who wants to fulfill the path at that point has to be able to recognize the 10 corruptions of insight and to understand that they are not the real path, and then get back onto the correct path. And when he gets back onto the correct path, then he will enter upon the sixth purification, purification by knowledge and vision of the way. And this starts again with knowledge of rise and fall, or the knowledge of arising and passing away. But this is the mature phase of the knowledge of rise and fall, the phase after one has overcome this barrier or this obstacle or this seductive decoy of the 10 corruptions of insight. And once one passes the 10 corruptions of insight, then one enters upon the successively deeper insight knowledges that eventually will lead to the supramundane or world transcending paths and fruits. Okay, so this gives us now a broad overview. And so now let us go back to our text. Oh, I forgot to put on. So let us go back to our text now. And we're now in chapter 20, which is dealing with purification by knowledge. That is the title of the chapter, Purification by Knowledge and Vision of what is the path and what is not the path. But we don't go directly into that knowledge. But first we have to come to the comprehension by groups. And that is said to be the beginning of insight. So the stages that we've come to previously, we could say that those stages, those knowledges pertain to panya, pertain to wisdom, but they are not yet the actual insight knowledges. The actual insight knowledge begins with comprehension by groups. But first, I want to now look at the three kinds of full understanding. So here the text tells us there are these three kinds of mundane full understanding. And so these are called the full understanding as the known, or I would prefer of the known, the full understanding as investigation, and full understanding as abandoning. And now the text will tell us what each of these types of full understanding entails. So what is classified under each of these types of full understanding. So first, the understanding that occurs by observing the specific characteristics of the mental and material phenomena, and then grouping them together and understanding what is materiality, that is, what is rupa, material form, what is feeling, what is perception, what are the volitional activities, what is consciousness. So understanding the characteristics of the 5 aggregates or the 12 sense spaces, the 18 elements and so on, that is full understanding as the known. So that is the distinguishing of formations and the defining of mentality, materiality. So that is one knowledge that comes under full understanding of the known. And the other is actually, this is better. Actually, number 4 is actually better. So the full understanding of the known extends from the distinguishing of formations up to through the discernment of conditions. So the full understanding of the known comprises these 2 knowledges, the distinguishing of formations or the defining of mentality, materiality, and the discernment of conditions. So that is what we've already covered. Then the next, and what occurs during the stage of full understanding of the known is observing the specific characteristics of those phenomena and also understanding or seeing into the conditions for the arising of the mental and material phenomena. Okay, then the second full understanding, this is the full understanding as investigation. This extends from the comprehension by groups up to the contemplation of rise and fall. And what is distinctive of this stage of full understanding is penetrating the general or universal characteristics. That is, seeing into the universal characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, or the unsatisfactory nature, and anatta, the non-self nature of all conditioned phenomena. Okay, then the third full understanding is called full understanding as abandoning. And this extends from the contemplation of dissolution upwards. And so we see here, whoops. Actually, I think this should be, it seems that this, I'm actually not quite sure whether the mature knowledge of rise and fall, whether it comes under the full understanding by investigation or full understanding by abandoning. But in any way, we could be certain that the full understanding by abandoning extends from the knowledge of dissolution all the ways up to the knowledge of conformity or perhaps change of lineage. And then the supramundane full understanding by abandoning is the attainment of the world transcending paths. Okay, so now we're going to go to what is called, what has been translated as comprehension by groups. And let me take the Pali expression and give an explanation. Whoops. Okay. Yeah, the Pali expression here is kalapa sammasanna. And kalapa means a group, since one will be taking phenomena organized into different groups, as we'll see. And by kalapas, some of you might have been already familiar with the Abhidhamma treatment of the material phenomena by way of kalapas, but that's not what is intended here. These are not just the material kalapas, the clusters of material phenomena, but this is the classification of phenomena into different groups, like the 5 aggregates, 12 sense bases, 18 elements, and so on. But what we're especially concerned with is this word sammasana, and it's very difficult to get a good translation of it. So it has a prefix sam, and then the root of the word is mas, which I think in Sanskrit is mrish. Or is it? Yeah, I think it's that S. Not Mrs., but British. And the basic meaning of this root is to rub. And so sammasana is the mental, literally it would be the mental rubbing of these phenomena organized into groups. Yeah, the English word that I've been using for sammasana is exploration. Because in exploration, you're sort of touching on something, sweeping over it. And so maybe that is more satisfactory than comprehension. But since Venerable Nyanamoli used comprehension, we'll stay with that rendering. So how is this to be practiced? And now the Visuddhimagga is quoting a text that it bases this treatment of the insight knowledges very heavily on an earlier text that's included in the Sutta Pitaka, but it comes from a somewhat later period. It's not original to the Buddha, but the work is called the Pati Sambhida Magga, the path of discriminating knowledge or analytical knowledge. So it's dated perhaps to about the 2nd century, perhaps about 200, or maybe even the 1st century BC, 2nd century BC, 1st century BC, 200 or 300 years after the time of the Buddha. It's a highly analytical work, a little bit like a commentary, but and somewhat Abhidhammic in flavor, but it doesn't use the Abhidhamma system of explanation, but it has its own system of explanation. And it gives a highly analytical, expository treatment to many of the themes that we encounter in the suttas. And the Patisambhidamagga introduces many concepts which in a sense are drawing upon the suttas, but developing them in a new and somewhat unique way. And one of those ideas is this practice or stage of practice called comprehension by groups. And so what is meant by this knowledge of comprehension? So it says, by summarization, it says the understanding of defining past, future and present states, past, present, and future dhammas, by summarization, is knowledge of comprehension or knowledge of exploration. So what one does in this phase is to bring the multiple phenomena together into familiar groupings taken from the suttas, and then one explores them and sees how the three characteristics, the three universal characteristics, apply to these phenomena by way of past, future, and present. And now, as one has been practicing mindful attention to phenomena, to the material and mental phenomena, particularly in purification of view, defining and distinguishing the mental and material phenomena, one has been examining the phenomena as they are occurring in the present at each present moment. So one has to be actually observing and investigating material form in the present, feeling in the present, perception in the present, the volitional activities in the present, consciousness in the present. And one is seeing, as one is exploring them, one is seeing the three characteristics start to emerge in one's observation. But it's not yet a thorough and systematic investigation of the three characteristics. It's just that the characteristics sporadically start to appear in the course of one's investigation. But now, with the knowledge of comprehension, one is turning that sporadic and occasional recognition of the three characteristics into a thorough and systematic exploration of the three characteristics. And so this is the way the text explains it. First, it does so with reference to the five aggregates. So it says, any materiality, any material form, whether past, future, or present. So this is taking the three periods of time. So actually, we're going to find 11 ways of classifying any type of phenomena. So the first are three distinctions made by way of temporality. So past, future, or present. Then the second distinction is by relation to oneself. It can be either internal, that is pertaining to oneself, or external, in the case of material form, pertaining to the physical world or to the bodies of other living beings. So it's either one's own physical form, the physical form of bodies of other living beings, or the material of the natural world. Okay, then in regard to its, let's say, its general quality, gross or subtle, then its evaluative quality, its evaluation as either inferior, the word here is hina, low, inferior, or panita, excellent, superior, sublime. And then in relation to its location, either far or near. And so in this way, one is taking all material form of all types distinguished in these different ways, and one defines it, one distinguishes it, one comprehends it, or maybe we could say one explores all materiality as impermanent. So that is one kind of comprehension. Then one defines all material form as dukkha, as unsatisfactory. Here the text or the translator used painful. So it doesn't mean that one is actually feeling bodily pain, but it's unsatisfactory, bound up with suffering. So that is another kind of exploration or comprehension. And then one defines it as anatta, as non-self. So that is another kind of comprehension. So this is done first with regard to material form. Then one takes each of the other aggregates, feeling, perception, the mental formations or volitional formations, and consciousness. Each of these one takes past, present, or future, and so on, far or near, and so in that way one takes all instances, all occurrences of each of the 5 aggregates, and one ascribes to them the 3 universal characteristics: impermanent, dukkha, and not self. Then there are various other groups. We're going to come to them a little bit later. Okay, so here in this paragraph, we have simply the mention of the 3 characteristics. But the next paragraph gives a qualification to each of the 3 characteristics, or it gives some indication of what is meant by each of these 3 characteristics. So something is impermanent in the sense that it is subject to destruction. Here I've put the Pali. Let's blow this up. So kaya, the word kaya, means destruction. So whatever comes into existence is bound to go out of existence. And its going out of existence is called destruction. Then it's said to be dukkha, here painful, in the sense, I think terror is maybe too strong a word. The Pali word is bhaya, which maybe we could say fearful or dangerous, a cause of fear. So we're going to see the way that plays out as we go along. So we hold to the things that we desire, we cling to them and grasp them, and yet these things that we grasp are impermanent. And because they're impermanent, there's always, as we're grasping them, a kind of underlying anxiety or apprehension that they're going to pass away. And so in that way, they are potential sources of fear. And so whatever is impermanent is dukkha, in that it can be a trigger for fear. And then each of these things is said to be anatta, not self, in the sense of having no core, no essence. Here the Pali word is asaraka, and this is the negation of sara. Oops. And by sara, so that's the Pali word is sara. And the original meaning of sara is the heartwood of a tree, the core of a tree. And so the kinds of trees used in construction, for construction work, for making furniture, buildings, and so on, have beneath the bark and the softwood, they have an inner core of hardwood. That is Sara. And so then Sara comes to be given a kind of philosophical meaning of being an inner substance to something, an inner essence. And so, in effect, in relation to the human person, it will be a lasting substance, which is what we identify as a self. But in fact, all of the phenomena of the five aggregates and so forth have no self within them. So in that sense, they are a saraka without a core. And so one now extends one's understanding of the three characteristics to the five aggregates by spelling out, by recognizing the particular meaning of each of the three characteristics. Being subject to destruction, being a potential trigger of fear and anxiety, and having no inner essence, no core. And then there's another way of practicing this knowledge of comprehension. And so this is given here. So here in this case, we sort of elaborate particularly upon the characteristic of impermanence. And so materiality, whether past, future, or present, and so on, is impermanent. Then he uses the word formed, which I don't think is so good. I would render this rather conditioned. Arisen through the functioning of conditions. And then in effect, that means pretty much the same thing as dependently arisen. And because these things have arisen through conditions, they are subject to destruction, to falling away, to fading away, to cessation. And so one applies this understanding to each of the five aggregates and then to all of the other groups of phenomena. And these are different approaches, so you don't have to do all of them. But the usual way is to use the three characteristics: impermanent, dukkha, and non-self. Okay, here he goes on to apply it to the different links and dependent origination. Okay, and then here he shows the different groups of phenomena to which this knowledge of comprehension is applied. So we'll start with the five aggregates, the six sense doors, the six objects, six kinds of consciousness: contact, feeling, perception, volition, craving, applied thought, sustained thought, the six elements, the 10 kasinas, the 32 bodily parts, and so on and so on and so on. And maybe this might seem to you too very elaborate, and you think, wow, if I'm going to practice insight meditation according to the Visuddhimagga, I'm never going to get anywhere. What I say is, don't worry too much. That it's sort of the way the commentators treat a subject, maybe in order to compose big books, is to treat it as elaborately as possible. But in order to succeed in one's practice, one doesn't have to use all of these different methods and approaches. But when it finds a particular approach which is most suitable to oneself and one uses that particular approach. And so in my own understanding, in my own experience, the easiest way to go about developing the knowledge of comprehension is to take just the 5 aggregates and then to investigate the 5 aggregates by way of the 3 characteristics as defined here. Impermanence in the sense of destruction, dukkha in the sense of being a trigger for fear and anxiety, and not self in the sense of having no core. And that is sufficient. Okay, a lot of this elaboration. This is why I told you I had a note in the application for this course. I said, don't try to read these chapters on your own, because if you try to read them on your own, you'll just be overwhelmed by the detail. So what I'm trying to do is to cut out a lot of the extensive detail and go take a very straight and direct approach in the unfolding of the process of development. Okay, here one elaborates somewhat further in that one now takes the materiality that is past, was impermanent in the sense of destruction. Why? Because it was destroyed in the past, and that is in a past existence, and did not reach this present existence. And then one comprehends the materiality that is future as impermanent in the sense of destruction, in the sense that it will be produced in the next existence, and then it will be destroyed there and will not pass on to a further existence. And then one comprehends the materiality that is present as impermanent in the sense of destruction, since it will be destroyed in this life itself and will not pass on to the future existence. So this is taking impermanence in a very broad way. But now we're going to see how the contemplation of impermanence is going to be narrowed down at increasingly finer levels until one arrives at momentary impermanence. Okay, this we could pass over. Now we go to section 47. Though I'd say that if you want to get a sort of fuller understanding, a very full understanding of the 3 characteristics, you can take a look at this section on, it's called Strengthening Comprehension in 40 Ways. So this passage uses 40 aspects through which one examines the conditioned phenomena. And these 40 ways are actually just elaborations of the 3 characteristics. So just to take a few examples, so we have impermanent and dukkha. So those are the explicit characteristics. But then we have, one sees them as a disease, a boil, a dart, a calamity, an affliction. So those are different aspects of dukkha, elaborating on dukkha. Then one sees them as alien. That is, in a way, a synonym for non-self. Then as disintegrating, impermanent. Then as a plague, a disaster, a terror, a menace, as that is an elaboration of dukkha as fickle, perishable, unenduring impermanence. No protection, no shelter, no refuge. Dukkha, empty, non-self, and so on. void, non-self. And then here comes an elaboration of them. But we want to jump ahead now. We don't need all of this detail, though if you're really interested, you could go back on your own and read it later. But I want to show how the contemplation of impermanence is refined so that one comes to perceive impermanence at finer and finer, subtler and subtler levels. And so this is contemplating impermanence by way of taking up and putting down. So it says here, taking up means rebirth linking. That is the moment of conception, coming into this existence. And putting down is death. So that's the broadest span for contemplating impermanence, a single lifetime. And so theoretically, maybe a little optimistically, one assigns the lifespan, or one determines a lifespan of 100 years. And so that is the birth is the taking up, the death is the putting down, the lifespan is 100 years. And one considers that between these limits, all formations are impermanent, because whatever occurs in the span of 100 years will pass away before the lifespan of 100 years is finished. So it's impermanent because it arises and passes away. It undergoes change. It's temporary, and it excludes permanence. Then one defines it, it's painful because it is continually oppressed by rise and fall. So as one is bearing this body, it's constantly arising and passing. So one has to go through all of the activities every day of waking up, going to the bathroom, brushing the teeth, for men shaving, taking shower or bath, eating a meal, going to the toilet, going to work, spending a certain time at work, getting into arguments with one's colleagues, coming home, and so forth. So there's a constant rising and falling of different experiences, which, with a very subtle degree of awareness, is experienced as a continual oppression and as something being as hard to endure, hard to bear, as being the basis for actual suffering, and as excluding any kind of stable, immutable bliss or happiness. So those are ways to understand the characteristic of dukkha. And then they are to be understood as non-self, in the sense that one cannot exercise mastery over them. So one cannot say, let, for example, my body always be young, always be healthy, always be handsome and beautiful. But the body changes in accordance with the natural process of aging. I get sick, undergo injury because of conditions. And so I don't have mastery over the body, over my feelings, over my thoughts, over my perceptions. Of course, I can gain some control over them, but not an absolute mastery, so that whatever I want, I get. So that absence of mastery, that is one of the aspects of non-self. And also they are non-self because they are void, empty of any substance. They're without essence. They don't have a true owner, a self that owns the five aggregates. And so in this way, one sees the five aggregates are non-self. So that extends over the aggregates in the course of a single lifetime, hypothetically 100 years. But now one starts breaking down the periods in which one is going to be contemplating the three characteristics. And so one takes and that is called attributing the three characteristics to the five aggregates by way of the disappearance of what grows old in each stage. And so one takes the lifespan of 100 years, divides it into three stages, each one 33 years, the first, middle, and last stage. And so then one reflects the aggregates in the first 33 years passed away there, didn't continue into the middle 34 years, the middle stage. Those occurring in the middle stage, that would be 67 up to the age of 67. Those passed away in the middle stage, didn't continue into the last stage of 33 years. Wow, I'm in the last stage. So the materiality occurring in the first stage sees there without reaching the middle stage. Therefore, it's impermanent, painful, not self. And so those in the middle stage didn't reach the last stage. Okay, then one goes on breaking down the duration of the lifespan into smaller units. Next, units of 10 years. Then units of 5 years. Then units of 1 year each. So now you have 100 periods of 1 year each. Then one takes each year and distinguishes it by way of the 3 seasons. That's in the Indian culture or Indian climate, where you have 3 seasons. Here in the US, we would have 4 seasons. Okay, then he goes on distinguishing by way of the fortnight, the half of a month, and then one distinguishes by way of a night and day. So for example, the material form occurring in the night stops there and doesn't reach the day. The material form occurring in the day stops during the day and doesn't reach the night. So it is impermanent, painful, and not self. And this is all going on at the level still of reflection, conceptual reflection. But now one comes to observing the 3 characteristics in terms of immediate experience, direct experience. So for example, one takes moving forward and moving back. So one goes out, the material form involved in the act of going out ceases there and doesn't continue into the stage of coming back, returning. When I stretch out my arm, the material form involved in the act of stretching stops there and doesn't continue into the stage of bending in the arm. When looking out, the material form involved there ceases in the act of looking out and doesn't continue into the stage where I'm looking down or looking backwards and so on. Okay, now we come to applying the 3 characteristics to a single footstep. Somebody asked about this in the morning. So this is how one is now applying the contemplation to a single footstep, which is divided into 6 phases. There's the phase of lifting the foot up, then bringing the foot forward to the point where the foot is equal with the standing body. Then he has shifting sideways. That's not accurate, but it's bringing the foot forward. That is extending the foot beyond the body, then putting the foot down, lowering the foot to the ground, placing the foot on the ground, and pressing the foot down on the ground. And so in each of these phases, the material form that's occurring in the body arises and ceases in that phase and doesn't continue into the next phase. And so when I'm lifting the foot up, the material, say the cells and molecules and atoms of the foot arise and pass away in that act of lifting the foot up, and they cease there. And when I bring the foot forward, then new atoms and molecules and cells are occurring, and they cease in the phase of bringing the foot forward. When I bring the foot, extend the foot beyond the body, new molecules and atoms and subatomic particles are occurring. When I put the foot down, when I place the foot on the ground, when I press the foot on the ground, always the material phenomena are changing, and the mental phenomena, the feelings, perceptions, volitions, and the consciousness itself is arising and passing away. And so the elements and other types of materiality occurring in each stage cease there without reaching the next stage. And so they are all impermanent. They are marked with dukkha, being unsatisfactory and being without any core or essence. And so they're not self. And so in that way, he says, thus these formations, these conditioned phenomena keep on breaking up exactly where they arise. They arise, and then within a split second, they break up right there. It's like putting sesame seeds onto a hot pan. Wherever they arise, just there they cease, stage by stage, section by section, term by term, without reaching the next stage. And so they're impermanent, dukkha, non-self. And so in this way, the comprehension of materiality, of rupa, becomes extremely subtle. But one is contemplating not only rupa, but also contemplating the other aggregates occurring along with rupa, the mental aggregates. Okay, we have some elaborations here, not so necessary, but this is a good verse, an interesting verse. So it says, life, person, pleasure, pain, just these alone join in one conscious moment that flicks by. So gods, that's the devas, even though they live for 84,000 year aeons, they are not the same for 2 consecutive moments. So that is applying it to the material phenomena. And then one applies the 3 characteristics in a similar way to the mental phenomena. And this way one sees what is starting to see now impermanence, dukkha, and non-self in regard to all conditioned phenomena. Okay, with this now, we're about to come to the knowledge of rise and fall, but this I have saved for tomorrow's section. So let us now, we can take some questions and let me. Okay, so we start with, we start with Chi. You can unmute yourself.
But could you please explain a little bit Rupana, which is translated as molested?
Yeah, this is a kind of word play, which actually it comes in the suttas as well. Actually, there's two word plays here. Okay, so we have the word rupa is what we translate as, it actually has two meanings. In relation to the five aggregates, rupa is material form, physical form. And then in relation to sensory experience, rupa is visible form, the object that corresponds to the eye, the object that's perceived by eye consciousness. Okay, so there's a sutta in which the text derives the word rupa from a verb rupati. And the word rupati means something like to break up and to perish, to pass, to disintegrate. And this is what Venerable Nyanamoli translate as to be molested. And so there's a playful word derivation here. The word rupa in actuality doesn't have anything to do with the verb rupati, but there's a playful derivation of the word rupa from this verb rupati, to break up and to perish, because it's taken to be characteristic of material phenomena that they break up and perish. And the other word play is nama, taken to be mentality, from a verb namati, which means to bend. And so the commentaries explain that the mental factors are called nama because when one knows or experiences an object, the mental factors bend to that object in order to know it and experience it. Yeah, so that's the reason. That is the way these two words are each derived from a verb by a kind of pun. Okay, next question is from CU, and I say you can unmute yourself.
Oh, hi, Bhante. With regard to Nama and Rupa, form and mentality, so when I, let's say, direct one's mind towards a sensation, the mind, when it comes in contact, you experience it.
Yeah.
And so the materiality that was behind that sensation, was that materiality pre-existing, or did it just come, did it come into being just at that very moment due to past karma?
Let's leave the question of whether it's come into being through past karma or through other conditions. Put that question aside. Okay, the material phenomena are always changing, always arising and passing away. So let us say that one sees a form. One sees a form with the eye, right?
Yes, Bhante.
And now the visible form that one sees is always arising and passing away. And the eye itself is always arising and passing away. But the form and the eye have to be present at a tiny little sliver of time before the act of seeing the form can take place, because the mental factors, say the consciousness and the associated mental factors, need the eye as their support. So what we speak about is the eye here. It's not the continuing organ that we call the eye, but it's the momentarily arising phenomena that constitute the eye. So at a split second, the phenomena of the eye have to be arisen, and the phenomena of the visible form has to be arisen. And then based on that eye that's present, a consciousness can arise seeing the form. And the consciousness that sees the form arises and passes very quickly. And so what is actually taking place is a sequence or series of acts of consciousness based on the eye seeing the form. And all of them are constantly arising and passing away very, very rapidly. But because they're arising and passing so rapidly in such quick succession, we have the impression that there is a stable, lasting eye organ, which is seeing a stable, lasting, visible form. But all of these are actually arising and passing very, very quickly. To use an analogy that might make this clearer, what I'm told, and maybe some of you who are computer specialists know this better than I do, that when I'm looking at the computer screen, the screen is actually blacking out and coming back on hundreds of times in a split, maybe thousands of times in a second. But that blacking out and reappearing is occurring so quickly that it seems that I'm sitting here looking at the same word. But if my faculty of vision were to keep pace with the changes taking place in the computer screen, I would actually see the computer screen appearing, blacking out, appearing, blacking out, appearing, blacking out. But I can't see that. It's occurring too quickly. I hope that makes it somewhat clear.
So the thing is, Bhante, with the whether the form of the materiality, whether it's pre-existing. So if someone asks me, does your body exist? And if I say no, that's I feel it's wrong. At the same time, I understand the only concrete, the certainty I have is only at this right moment when the mind is experiencing a certain sensation. So my question is, if someone asks, does your body exist? How would you answer?
Of course the body exists. Why should you say it doesn't exist?
No, because we say the materiality comes into being when the mind comes at the same time.
No, it's not quite the case that the materiality, it's not the case that the materiality is created in any way by the mind. The materiality is, let's say let's take the physical body. It's all of the parts of the body are constantly arising and passing away. Even you could understand this by going to the subatomic level. So the subatomic particles of the body are actually really bundles of energy which are blinking into existence, perishing, followed by the next moment of energy, followed by the next moment of energy. And so there's a stream of energy which is constantly coming into existence, going out of existence. And it's occurring, those changes occurring very, very rapidly. So from that standpoint, we say that the body is in a constant process of very rapid, incredibly rapid change, so rapid that we can't even conceive the rapidity of the change. But despite that constant change, there's a certain stability in the structure, functioning, and appearance of the body. So we could certainly say the body exists. It's up to use an analogy. If you're sitting on the bank of a river, especially after a heavy rain when the water is flowing by very, very rapidly. So as you're sitting there, in each split second, there are different molecules of water flowing by. If somebody asks you, does the river exist? Of course you say the river exists. The river is there. It's just that the water of the river is always flowing by very rapidly. The same with the body. The matter of the body is always streaming in and out of existence, but in its continuity, the body exists.
Thank you, Bhante. Very nice. Thanks.
Okay, Shan Jong Bashar. Let me unmute.
Bunny, can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear.
Oh, sorry. My question is, when practicing knowledge of comprehension in the 11 ways, it seems that 10 out of the 11 ways, such as past, present, internal, external, etc., can be discerned based on real experience. But future, since we are not experiencing future when we practice this knowledge of comprehension, is when we discern 5 aggregates for future, is that based on assumption that these 5 aggregates have this 3 universal characteristics?
Yeah, very good question. And it's that's that is exactly the important point, that what one is doing here, that is why it is called summarizing or generalization or inference. So one gets the direct experience of, say, the impermanence, dukkha, non-self, from what is occurring in the immediate present. But from the immediate present, one then extends one's understanding to all periods of time. So one then understands that all material form in the past, not only of this life, but in past lives, was marked by impermanence, dukkha, non-self, that all material form in the future will be marked by impermanence, dukkha, non-self. And the same with the other factors, the feeling, perception, volitions, consciousness. So from one's immediate direct experience, one is generalizing to encompass all possible conditioned phenomena, past and future as well.
Thank you, Bande.
Okay, then we come to Namal. You unmute.
Thank you, Bante, for taking my question.
Okay.
My question is regards the conceptual versus the experiential knowledge of the 3 characteristics of all conditioned phenomena. In a personal way, how do you know when you actually go from conceptual to experience? Because even conceptual knowledge can be very sincere and you can hold on to it very fast, but how do you know that you've gone from conceptual to experiential knowledge?
Okay. Yeah, and even experiential knowledge also involves conceptualization. So there's no real experience that doesn't involve some degree of conceptualization, but it's the experiential knowledge is based on direct observation. So it's what one sees for oneself. So let us take maybe we'll do it at a relatively coarse level. Say one is using the in and out breathing as a basis for observing impermanence. And so when one breathes in, one sees the in-breath comes to an end and then is followed by the out-breath. So one knows that by direct experience, the in-breath is impermanent. Of course, it's finished. Then one is observing the out-breath. And when that out-breath comes to an end, one sees that out-breath is impermanent because the out-breath came to an end. Okay, and then as the mindfulness and concentration becomes stronger, even within the in-breath, one will see that there are different sort of phases in an in-breath. So one starts the in-breath, and then it comes to the middle phase, the end phase, and there are these little sort of jerks and bumps even within a single in-breath. And one sees that each of these phases comes to an end. And so one is seeing impermanence within the phases of the in-breath and again within the phases of the out-breath. Again, you could do this with the steps. So one sees when lifting the foot, that one is observing the lifting, then one sees the lifting comes to an end, replaced by the pushing of the foot forward. And so one sees the lifting was impermanent. Now there's pushing forward, that comes to an end. So one sees impermanence there. One puts the foot down, that putting down comes to an end. So one directly experiences impermanence there. And then one presses, and that comes to an end. And one sees impermanence there too. And so that's at a relatively coarse level, but as it becomes, the mindfulness and concentration becomes stronger and sharper, then even at the moment-to-moment level, one is seeing all of these phenomena just arise and pass away. The way the text says, it's just moment by moment, instant by instant, section by section, material form, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness arise and pass away. One is seeing that with direct experience.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Ellen.
Thank you, Bhante. I hope this question isn't too basic. It pertains to something you said earlier this afternoon. Someone asked a question about determination, whether it was determinative, and you talked about the role of volition at that point. And my question is, if there is no self, where does the volition arise? How does that happen?
Yeah, the volition is a mental factor that arises within the stream of consciousness, the stream of mental activity. And that volition is what directs the action. And the particular choice of action that the particular path of action that it takes will be governed by one's evaluation of the different choices available to oneself and by the mental factor of decision. And so this is looking at the process of like making a decision and taking a course of action from a microscopic level. But when we look at it from a more ordinary, from the standpoint more of ordinary day-to-day experience, even though we don't posit a substantial self behind the process, but we could still speak about, I made that decision myself. I have the capacity to choose amongst the different options available to me. So there's no sort of permanent, lasting self behind this process that's making the decisions and directing the actions, but there are these acts of these mental factors that are responsible for making the choices and taking the actions.
So could we say that those mental factors are analogous to what you just talked about, the body and the river, that it's, since it's constantly changing, it's impermanent and yet it exists?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're wrong. Let me unmute. Okay, you unmute yourself.
Monday, if we take the walking meditation as an example, well, if my understanding is correct, we're supposed to pay attention to the three characteristics of the materiality of the action, rather than the volition, because there is a volitional component to walking, right? I have to have this intention to lift the step, the foot, and then move forward. So we're supposed to focus on just the materiality, including, for example, there's gravity, and gravities will pull my leg down. So we just observe that phenomenon without paying attention to our mental factor. Is that correct?
No, no. Generally, this would be in the systematic development of insight over like an extended retreat. One usually starts just by paying attention to the material or physical side, to the act of walking. But the way it's taught, this is the way it's taught, say, within the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition. After one gains a certain degree of progress in observing the act of walking, just paying attention to the bodily aspect, one is then told to note the volition involved in each step and each phase within each step. So let us suppose one is dividing the step into 3 phases: picking up, pushing forward, putting down. So when one is doing this practice, one will note the volition to pick up the foot, then the act of picking up. Then one notes the volition to bring the foot forward, and then the physical act of bringing the foot forward. Then the volition of to put the foot down, and then the act of putting the foot down. So that's with 3 phases. So it's taking together both the physical act of walking, but actually beginning with the mental side, with the volition followed by the physical action. And then the step can be divided into 6 phases with 6 volitions, which can drive you a little bit crazy if you start to do this too early. So with each of these 6 phases, you have to note the volition and the physical act. And that is sort of tuning up the mind to observe nama-rupa, mentality and materiality, at subtler levels, which starts to bring the characteristic of impermanence to make it more and more evident, more and more prominent. Because you see how each volition arises and each phase of walking arises and stops. Even in a single step, 6 subdivisions with a mental side and a material side. Clear enough?
Yeah, but if that's the case, my understanding is that 5 aggregates arise simultaneously, right? So inevitably, by the time I'm able to observe the physical act, and of course there's a volition before it, it's already a memory. It has to be something that already happens before a second consciousness is able to see, to observe what the act of walking and the volition and act of walking. So I'm not quite sure we're really observing that physical action of walking. We're almost invariably have to observe our memory of the act of walking. The same thing, like if we talked about the impermanence of the materiality in the past, since it's a materiality in the past, it's already gone. There's no way to observe that physical act. So it has to be a memory, right?
In the case of the past, yeah, but in the case when you're actually observing the act of walking, at least at the level of ordinary consciousness, one is observing the act of walking in the present. We don't have to take the microscopic level of the individual cheetahs, but as far as we experience it, it seems that we are aware of the act of walking while the step is actually taking place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'll have to take just one more question, then we'll take a little break. And then we'll do the closing meditation. So this will be Yolan.
Bante, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Bante, this is driving me nuts. I'm listening to this, right? But it's part of it, what you were talking about, sounded just like life, the human life, and getting old.
Yeah.
How each section was disintegrating and disintegrating and disintegrating. So you start thinking about, is this about aging and dying and then the rebirth? Okay. But then I couldn't connect it up with emptiness, the concept of emptiness. I couldn't make it work in my head.
Yeah, at this point.
And the concept of being empty of its intrinsic nature, when something is empty of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those expressions, empty of intrinsic nature, are used more in the Madhyamaka system, but we'll come to emptiness either tomorrow or I think on Sunday or Monday. So let's not bring in emptiness right now.
Can you align it with this when we come to it? Well, somehow, so I can have an understanding of this?
Yeah, it seems so that you're bringing in a sort of conceptual framework from a different system of Buddhist practice and realization, and it's not always possible to square them with each other.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bante. This has been very, very exciting.
Okay. I should give somebody from the support team the chance to ask a question. So I'll see if Yvonne has a simple question. Then we'll have to stop. Yvonne, you want to unmute and ask?
I couldn't get it across. Oh boy.
Okay, I'm not getting the question, so we'll go to Hillary. You want to ask your question?
Hi, Bande, can you hear me? This is Hillary. I have one quick question. Okay. In paragraph 72, it mentioned that the gods, though they live for eons, they are not the same for two such moments.
Yeah.
But then when I refer to, my understanding is there's no same moments of a mind that they will experience. But then from the Chinese translation says that no two mind can exist together. So I wonder because both versions are translation, so I wonder what the original text says, which one is closer?
I'd have to start looking into the Pali now, and that will take time.
Okay, that's all.
I'll do that later, but.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Bande.
I think we're going to have to take a break now. And so those people who have questions.
My mind is burnt out.
Who's that?
Yes, I can use a break. My mind is.
Okay. So we will take a break now. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back for the concluding meditation. So at 8:35, we'll be back. Okay, are we ready to resume?
Yes, Bante.
Okay, so now we are going to do the closing meditation on loving kindness. So again, take your comfortable meditation sitting posture. And first, settle the mind by just letting the mind settle into the felt sense of the body. And then let the mind settle in the region of the heart. Now we're going to do the practice of loving kindness, of metta. And so begin by developing or extending loving kindness to yourself. So see your own image in your mind's eye, and then generate the wish, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be safe, safe from all harm and danger. Just keep on turning those phrases over and generating in the heart the feeling that corresponds to those words. The sincere, deep wish for one's own well-being, happiness, and safety. Okay, now you choose a few dear and beloved people, family members or close friends, just 3 or 4, not more than that. See them in your mind's eye, invite them into your heart, and there generate the wish that they might be well, happy, and safe. Okay, now you extend your mind further and choose some of your neighbors or acquaintances, colleagues at work, people that you just have a casual relationship with, people in your building or on your street. Again, generating the wish that they will be well, healthy of body and mind, happy, and safe from harm and danger. Okay, now we extend the mind still further. Extend it over your entire country and invite all of the people in your country to come into the range of your heart, even considering them, thinking of them as being your own dear parents, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, and generating towards them that wish that they will all be well, all happy, and all safe from harm and affliction. And during this time of the COVID pandemic, we could focus especially upon doctors, nurses, medical workers, essential service workers, those who are putting themselves at risk, strongly wishing that they will be safe, healthy, and safe. Okay, now extend the mind further to encompass all human life, all human beings on planet Earth, in all the different countries, continents, people of every race, ethnicity, religion, language, generating the wish, may all of the people in this world be well, happy, and safe. And in this time, we think particularly of the people who are afflicted with the COVID virus or the COVID-19, or who are in danger of being afflicted, generating the wish that they emerge healthy, happy, and safe. Okay, now extend the mind most broadly and universally to encompass all sentient beings, whether in this world or other worlds, in all the different realms of existence, generating the wish, may all beings be well, may all beings be happy, may all beings be safe from harm and danger. Okay, you go on continuing to generate the loving kindness and extend the loving kindness. And I'm going to recite the verses for sharing the merits we've all acquired in the course of this day through teaching the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, discussing Dhamma, practicing meditation and devotions. And so we invite all of the beings to rejoice in our merits and share in our merits. Akasata cha bhumata Devanaga Mehidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanang Akasata Chabumata Devanaga Mehidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanang Akasata Chabumata Devanaga Mehidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mangparang Etavata Cha Amhehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavata Cha Amhehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Bhutanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavata Cha Amhehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Sata Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Bhavagopadaya Vici Hetato Etantare Sathakayupapanna Rupya Rupicha Sanya Sanino Tukha Pamuchantu Pusantu Nibuting. And you say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so that is the program for today. And so now I will sign off, and I thank you all for your participation, and we will continue tomorrow with the session of meditation, and then continuing exploring the stages in the path of purification. So I wish you all either good night or good afternoon, or perhaps if you're on the other side of the world, good morning, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
And